Hey everyone, welcome to day 3, video 3 of the Vidable From Broken to Becoming. If you are new here, please like, share, subscribe. If not, cop a squat, take a listen, and who knows, there may be something in this story for you. As an introduction, I am Melanie Morgan, and I have written the book From Broken to Becoming. This is a true story of some trauma that I experienced. And if you would like to purchase the book, it is on Amazon for sale. Very, very cheap, by the way. It is on Amazon, and I'll have the link in the description box below. If you'd like to learn more about me and other things that I do, such as my blog, The Fugly Ugly Truth, I'll also have the link to my website down below in the description. So let's take a ride, shall we? We are on chapter 2 of page 7, and it is called Sister, Sister. There's comfort in being with someone who has known you their whole life, who looks up to you, who enjoys being around you, just because you're you. No matter what your past looks like, someone you could be unapologetically real with about everything and anything, and despite what they may do in the same situation, loves you enough to just listen and wants only your happiness. This is my sister. And having her as my writing partner at such a difficult moment in my life was freeing. We didn't have to talk much about what happened that brought us on this road trip, moving me 1,000 miles away. We didn't need to. Without being said, I knew, she knew that I'd lost myself for a very long time. And without judgment, she just traveled alongside me on my journey to find myself again. And for the first time in a long time, I could be goofy and laugh from deep within about everything and nothing. The spontaneous girl that buried her identity in the silence of rejection was present in this moment with her. There was no joy in what was happening, but I was praying and hoping that I could find joy again. And because of this, my hope kept my spirits up as we traveled. Her love and her presence was exactly what I needed at this moment in my life. When my world was changing with a sense of uncertainty, she kept me sane at a moment when my sanity was lost. She gave me the sense that I was on the way to becoming whole again, to becoming me again, a woman of strength and positivity, unafraid and full of life. During our trip, we reflected on a lot of our family memories, on the distance from our native home, our mother and brothers, and all that we were without. We reminisced on everything and longed for some of what we left behind. I was all she really had in Washington, and she was all I really had, and here we were, separating with each mile we traveled. We left that unsaid, but it was there. I could not have done this without her. Little did we know that we would need each other far more than ever before in just a few short days, and that the need would separate us even more than the number of miles between us. We were about to be propelled into our own corners of the world, into a darkness neither of us could share with anyone, not even each other. Our drive to Arizona was long, but too quick at the same time. She stayed for a few days and helped me find a bed, get some dishes and necessities, and ventured with me around my new town so I could become familiar with my surroundings. It was a godsend having her there with me, and a wonderful distraction to everything I was going through. Though I am the oldest and generally the one to step up for everyone else, it was such a beautiful experience to have someone step up for me, to take care of me, and to make me feel like that was all that mattered. No expectations, no need for compensation, no demands, just love. She reminded me what family looks like, feels like, and is when family is the bond that keeps you. She reminded me of the strength I've had throughout our lives and gave me the courage to reach for it again. She helped me see the beauty inside that I buried beneath, trying to be more to others who could not see my worth. She reminded me of the woman I once was, fearless, wise, full of love and laughter, and worthy to receive what I give. On this trip, she was the cornerstone that held me up under all that was crumbling around me, and what she gave me would be what I would use to rebuild upon. If you have not followed the first chapter in the book, I was leaving Washington and moving down to Arizona, and my marriage was on shaky ground, and I had taken a job in Phoenix because I think that separation was necessary at the moment to give us all an opportunity to breathe. So anyway, my sister rode alongside with me, and it was a wonderful experience to have someone with me, someone that knew me almost better than anyone else. Anyway, we are going on to chapter 3, and I am going to read chapter 3 so that you understand where we're going to go next. I did promise in the last video that I would move on to the story about my brothers, and so we're going to get started. Chapter 3, Little, Lost, and Led, page 9. I'd been in Phoenix by myself for about a week and started my new job, met my team, and was starting to get familiar with my new area and home. I was still very much unsettled in the house with nothing but a new mattress and box spring. The movers had not yet arrived, so my home was as bare as was my heart, a bit dark, a bit empty, and a whole lot lonely. Still, this was my journey to finding me again and to relearn who I lost, discover where I lost her, and work to bringing her back. I'd learned that the empty house made for great acoustics, to sing as loudly as I needed to, wanted to, and without shame, and I sang often, which I'm sure annoyed my neighbors. But since no one banged on my door to quiet me down, I sang every day. I sang in the shower, in the living room, in the kitchen, in the car, in the pool. Wherever there was no one, I sang. It was my process for breaking out of the shell I closed myself up in. Even when I didn't feel like singing, I sang louder. Now that I look back on this, I may have been singing to block out the noises in my head and the silence at the same time. I missed my husband. I missed his smell and his touch. Even though we spent the last few months together, distant and apart, I still lived with the imagined closeness that had been there before it just wasn't anymore. I could still see his eyes as clearly as though he were right there with me, hear his voice in the morning and at night. I just missed him, and I had to force myself to remember that I missed me just a little bit more. It's impossible to give someone a part of you that you don't even own for yourself. You can't give someone all of you if there's nothing left of yourself to give. Realizing all of this was breaking my heart, but was also the catalyst that pushed me towards change. I needed change. I needed freedom to be myself. I needed so much more that I'd been without for so long that not knowing where I was going was good enough for me. We still talked every day and still argued on each call. We cried each time, and that never stopped. The separation was hard, one of the hardest things I'd ever done, and I'm not a fragile, needy person. But I missed him beyond what I thought I would. When we would talk, I would start off by telling him about my day, my team, the job, the house, as though we were doing this together. The small talk only led to deeper talk of hurts and heaviness. It probably was not healthy to keep doing this, but we did. Neither of us could stop. And so we continued talking as though it were normal, and then talking, knowing it was far from normal. It was a continuous cycle that broke us each night, but we would try again the next morning, and on it went. One morning he'd called me, and I had been out with some girlfriends at a bachelor party the night before. I had a few drinks, one to celebrate the bride, one to celebrate my freedom, one to celebrate my new job, and on it went. What would happen on this phone call would change everything, and perhaps the night before was God giving me one more day of bliss before the breaking. I'd been so deep in sleep that he had to call me a few times. When I woke up to his voice, he was more broken than usual and somewhat afraid. His next words would break me more than any others we had ever spoken to each other. "Honey, are you awake? I need you to sit up and tell me you're listening." Your brother Jerry has died. He committed suicide. We've been calling you all morning." I don't exactly remember a whole lot of that moment, but I do remember the deep wail that cried out of my mouth. It wasn't my voice, but it was the sound of my soul breaking. And for the first time since I'd been there, the empty house swallowed me whole, covered me in blackness, and took every last ounce of joy that I had desperately clung to. I jumped out of bed only to fall to the floor. There was no strength in my legs, and everything that held me up to this moment left me, and there I was, on the floor, shattered. He was gone. My first thought was my mom, then my sister, then his kids, and as the eldest child, I felt the urge to care for everyone else, even though I could barely stand by myself. I called my mom, no answer. I called my sister, no answer. I called my husband again, no answer. I was frantic and afraid. I felt so little facing this enormous tragedy by myself. My brother was gone. I was told he took his own life, but in that moment, there was no way that I could believe that. There was more to it. There had to be, and I needed to know what that was. Who did this to my little brother? Who hurt him? I was enraged, and this is where my strength came from. It was temporary, but it was just enough to give me what I needed. I needed it from somewhere. I was here broken and alone. He left this world broken and alone. All of his life he struggled to survive, and here I was trying to live my best life. I felt guilty for going out the night before when I realized that he was hurting so much that he was ready to leave this world at the very same moment I was starting to build mine. My heart was aching, and I felt like just closing into myself and never leaving. He left me. He left my mom. He left his babies. He left us all. I left him. I left him there on that island, and he needed me. I was so consumed with my life, myself, my job, my dreams, and he was breaking. I left him there. I didn't get to see him. I'd been trying to call him for days, and his home phone was not working. Each time I would call his home line, it would immediately go to static and click off. Something in me told me I needed to talk to him, but I could never reach him, and he needed me. He died alone with his perceived failures, his real hurts, and his cry for a desperate and imagined peace, a silence, rest. He died alone. He took a piece of me that I will never get back. He took with him the strength we shared as children when we were forced to face the brutal beatings of my mom by my father. He took with him the comfort we provided each other in the moments when we were helpless to help ourselves or our baby brother. He took the laughter we shared to cover the trauma. He took with him the silent words we shared, the knowing that's all we ever had. I took that from him when I left Guam. We've been through so much in our lives, so much for the little bodies we were. Our childhood was filled with trauma and sadness from the time we could crawl. The things we had seen had such an impact on me that I remember more than I should have from the age of 2. My dad yelling and my mom screaming. Those were my first memories. Those sounds continued for years, and I will never, ever forget them. My brother Jerry was only 11 months younger than me, and he and I always held on to each other when the beatings would start. These were his first memories. By the time I was 3, we had brother Gilbert, newly born, to care for during the screaming, and the 3 of us just hunkered down, crying for our mommy, waiting until we couldn't hear her anymore, or until we cried ourselves to sleep, hoping to find silence. At the age of 4, I had an appendix erupt, and we'd been locked in our home with chains and bars on the outside of every door and window. I remembered laying on the floor in excruciating pain, and my mom and Jerry were breaking through the floorboards of our home. She put his little body through the hole they made, and he ran up and down our village street, screaming for anybody to help his sister. His bravery saved me that day. His love saved his sister. I believed it was at that moment that my mom knew she had to leave. To put herself at risk was one thing, but to nearly lose her child and risk the life of another was more than enough to pull her out. We would finally be free. Or so we thought. The next relationship my mom entered was with a man that broke down our doors to set us free, stood up to my uncle, and walked us out. He became the father of my sister, 8 years younger than me. During our time with him, I remember trying to protect my brothers from him all the time. They would get hit or chastised for the littlest things. If they failed to put their bikes away, he would knock them on their heads with a wooden brush, or even worse, dangle them mid-air from the hair on top of their heads. Jerry and Gilbert never had it easy. Growing up was one struggle after another, and they never really knew the peace of simply being a child, free to be, free to laugh, love, and play. They never really knew the carefree happiness that comes with the rights of being a child. As adults, we were still chasing some kind of peace and struggling to find true happiness, leaving our demons behind. We picked up new demons of drug use and drinking, often done together. It was the wrong path, but still it was a path we walked through together until the day I decided that my life had to change, and hopefully they would follow in my footsteps too. At that point, I left Guam, hoping to beat the demons that followed us and held us in its grasp for many, many years. All of my memories of our childhood flashed before my eyes, and I broke, remembering our brokenness. He left this world broken still. Knowing this shattered my whole world, and I laid there on the floor and cried until I fell asleep, hoping to find silence. When I woke up, I was in autopilot mode. I made the phone calls I needed to make and started to make arrangements to go home. When I accepted this job offer, they'd given me a sign-on bonus of $20,000. Had I not accepted this job, I would not have had the funds necessary to get home or get my sister home or handle some of the financial needs for his kids and the family. Little did I know that God had been working in my circumstances before I even searched for him. He gave me what I needed before I even knew I would need it, before I even knew I would need him. But I was just about to find out how much he carried me through the last 6 years up to this moment. The moment the world took my world away and changed me forever. It would be a few days before I could leave Phoenix and make my way back to Washington to fly out with my sister. So I'd be stuck in the silence of my dark and empty home. I would be alone at a time when I needed someone, anyone, to get me through this. But I had no one there. I'd started my new job 1 week prior to Jerry's death. I had a 1-year commitment because of the sign-on bonus, which I needed at this moment. But I needed to leave more. But how do you leave a job that you just started and tell people that still have no real personal investment in you, nor a relationship with you, that you need to leave right after you just got there? I learned of Jerry's death on Sunday and how to go to work the next day. I was faced with the task of wearing a mask of false bravado, standing when I needed to fall, talking when I needed silence, and walking when I was shutting down. There was also the fear of talking to complete strangers and hoping that there would be a way I could go home to bury my brother and not place my new job in jeopardy and have to give the money back that I spent to get there and the money I needed to get home to put my brother to rest. When I got to work on Monday morning, I was clearly not altogether there, but it was time to talk to the director and break the news that I would be leaving. I was filled with fear because what I knew of my new boss was admittedly very little, but enough to make me afraid of being too personal with her. Here is another sign that God had been working in my life before I knew I would need him. I walked into the director's office and asked if I could speak with her. She agreed, and I closed the door. As soon as the door shut, the tears I'd been holding in all morning poured out in full force in front of a perfect stranger. I told her what had happened with my brother and that I would be leaving to Guam for 3 weeks. I offered to submit my resignation and offered to sign a promissory note to pay the company back if I would lose my job because of this. She stood up, took my hands in her hands, and looked directly into me and told me that I could take all the time I needed and that my job would still be there when I returned. That is the grace of God and the provisions that He set aside for me for just a time as this. I still did not know God personally yet, nor was I searching for Him, but there He was, working through someone else to give me the comfort and courage I needed to face the most difficult days that I have had to live up until that moment. The director took on the burden of working with my team in my absence and made the necessary calls to HR to allow my absence and let me leave. Just like that. She had no idea what that did for me and how pivotal she was in my search for Christ and in my search for healing. Her kindness was foreign to me and was the first open door that I needed to begin my journey. And there he was, working through someone else to give me what I needed. I headed to my new shell of a home and started to pack. And as I was packing, I was overwhelmed with weakness and fell to my knees on my bedroom floor. At that moment, a vision of my brother crying amidst the branches came to me. I saw his tears. I saw his brokenness. I saw his desperation for peace. I saw him cry out, and then I saw an angel bring him comfort. I saw light in the trees take him from the branches and wipe his tears, and I felt the peace he had been searching for, as if I was him in that tree. I know it sounds crazy, but all I can tell you is that I was there when he left this earth. And he left this earth in the arms that loved and comforted him. It was at that moment that I knew I needed to find God. There was an urgency deep in my heart that told me I needed to forgive those who took my brother from me. It was that moment that propelled me into his embrace. Every pain, every shattered piece of me was made whole for just that moment, and I knew those weren't my broken pieces. They were Jerry's. And for the first time ever, he found a love unconditional. He found peace. I can't explain the vision, even to myself sometimes, but I know it was as real as it was to Jerry in his last moments. He let me see. He let me in. And this changed everything I thought I knew. That night, I was so compelled to find God, I drove around my surrounding area to find a church. I wanted to find a church that I could go to for service, and I needed to know how to get there when the courage would come. As I drove by one of the churches, there were people there at 7 p.m. walking in. They were dressed casually, and I felt the calling to go in. I parked the car and timidly walked toward the open door. A woman that was walking in greeted me like she had known me forever. She walked in with me, had me sit next to her, and during the reading, she guided me through it. Once the reading was over, they asked if there were any visitors and if we would be willing to share what brought us here to their small group meeting. I didn't know where my courage came from, but I raised my hand and shared the death of my brother and my need to find God in all of this. She took my hand and told me that I was safe and covered by his wings now, and that he would get me through this. And this was just the beginning. She told me I was not there by accident. And she was amazed to see the Holy Spirit working in someone's life because she had never really witnessed it before that moment. This was the beginning of my journey home. When I got back to Washington, I had a couple of days until our trip to Guam. Actually, I'm going to stop there just because we are at 24 minutes. That's longer than I expected. And I got a little emotional. And I don't want to ugly cry on camera. You don't want to see an ugly cry anyway. So I will start. We left off on page 15. And this will be my journey back to Guam when I do record this tomorrow. So thank you for sharing your time with me. And again, if you did enjoy this and you'd like to see more, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you and have a great evening. Take care and always choose happy. Toodles.